It's the conclusion of spooky season, and you know what that means. Plenty of creepy, unsettling, and fantastical novels. This year, I read a blend of horror and dark fairy tales, with ghost stories being particularly prominent. From late August to October, these are the books I loved and now recommend for future Halloween seasons. Kicking off the season, I read Erin Morgenstern's The Night Circus. I didn't know what to expect from this book, but I'd heard good things, and I wasn't disappointed. We follow two competing magicians who must perform ever more spectacular feats of magic until one is declared a winner. But rather than perform in secret, our protagonist rivals use a traveling circus, open only at night, as their battleground, with an additional challenge being a need, since it's being exhibited to the public, to disguise the literal magic as magic tricks. I loved reading the vivid descriptions of the circus itself. Even outside the actual spells, it's a magical place, featuring a large clock and a black and white color scheme. The book is a visual feast, but the competition is underpinned by a budding romance between our two competitors. When it comes to how a given magician must win the competition, there's a dark twist. And the way our heroes circumvent this leads, without going into spoilers, a bittersweet ending. The characters are engaging, especially the magicians Celia and Marco, and their romance, which is tasteful and slow burn, offers a grounded reprieve from the flashy displays of magic. Beyond the many players and moving pieces, though, where this novel excels is in its atmosphere. The Night Circus as a location is a character in itself, and one any reader will enjoy inhabiting, competing in terms of whimsy and charm with Hogwarts itself, featuring gowns that change color, visions of the future, and undying frost gardens. This book is melancholy and whimsical, perfect for starting the fall season. Of all the books I've read thus far, this is easily one of my favorites. T.J. Klune's Under the Whispering Door is not only a ghost story, but a love story. Our protagonist, Wallace, isn't a very nice person when he's alive, to put it lightly, but he's given a new lease on life, or rather death, when a sudden heart attack leads to him being collected from his own funeral by a woman acting as his reaper. At first panicked, Wallace gradually comes to terms with his death, and despite being a bit of a pill at first, he eventually befriends the inhabitants of the coffee shop where he's brought. However, this isn't just any old coffee shop. Hugo, what is known as a ferryman, passionately runs the coffee shop by day, but outside working hours, he utilizes the space as a waypoint for ghosts on their way to the afterlife. This is where the titular Whispering Door comes in. Built into the shop, it serves as the gateway to the beyond, though what lies there no one knows, ghost or mortal. It's Hugo's job to guide these spirits, however long that may take, and Wallace is one of these ghosts. But when Wallace doesn't leave, he becomes a part of the fabric of the shop. And, as with House in the Cerulean Sea, we're treated to a cast of flawed, mostly human characters. T.J. Klune's signature humor shines through here, as well as powerful themes of grief, regret, and how it feels to be the other. But Wallace develops not only friendships with a reaper, a crotchety elder of a ghost, and a ghost dog, but with Hugo, which blossoms into something more. Suffice it to say that a romance between a living person and a dead one is nothing short of bittersweet, especially when you throw in the meddling of an entity known only as the manager. But this book earns the distinction of being one of the few to make me cry. I won't spoil the ending for you. All I'll say is that the romance between Wallace and Hugo is tender and kind, built on several exchanges and a growing trust. Bit by bit, we're fed information about this magical limbo we've been thrust into. And the book has its creepy moments, with Wallace learning about creatures known as husks. This book made me think of the movie Ghost, and Wallace and Hugo face a similar dilemma to Sam and Molly, and that they can't physically touch each other, though they yearn to. If that doesn't pull at your heartstrings, I don't know what will. But if you'd like some tissues with your pumpkin lattes, as well as some laughs, I can't recommend this heartwarming, bittersweet ghost story enough. At number 3, we have The Graveyard Book. I'd wanted to read this book for a long time, intrigued by the premise, which sees a group of ghosts raising and protecting a human child after his family is murdered. However, even knowing how dark Gaiman's writing could be, I was still struck by the brutal opening, which lists the victim, including a child, of a knife-wielding murderer as he steals through the house. That our protagonist, named Nobody by his ghost caretakers, escapes is mere chance. But the denizens of the graveyard, as well as an in-between figure, Silas, must protect him from the killer, the man Jack, who still hunts for him. Silas is an in-between figure. Though given permission to reside in the graveyard, he is neither living or dead, monster or human. He is something in between, and he acts as Nobody, or Bod's, guide. What follows are a series of almost episodic adventures within the graveyard itself. As he grows older, Bod explores further and further, discovering the unsanctified portion of the graveyard, as well as the land of the ghouls. He befriends the various ghosts from all different time periods that haunt his home, but develops a friendship with a human girl his age too, reconnecting with her later in time to finally confront the man who murdered his family and discover why they were killed to begin with. This book is chilling in places, but also strangely heartwarming. While I don't condone Gaiman's actions, I can't deny that his books are beautifully unsettling, and Bod is an engaging hero to follow. I had a lot of fun learning more and more about the town, the graveyard, and the supernatural world which extends beyond it. And Bod is the perfect vehicle through which to experience this world, as, like the reader, he's learning too. Following that, I read Gaiman's The Ocean at the End of the Lane. And again, I wasn't disappointed. This book genuinely creeped me out in places, especially when it came to the section where our nameless protagonist, a 7-year-old boy, had to pluck a miscolored worm from his foot. There are scarier sections than that, but I don't want to spoil them. The story opens with our protagonist, as an adult, returning to his childhood town to attend a funeral. But on impulse, he drives to the home of his former neighbor, Letty Hempstock, where he relives the repressed memories of his youth, realizing in the process that his childhood wasn't as ordinary as he thought. If the Hempstocks are mysteries, the world our worlds they exist on the fringes of are more so. And our terrifying antagonist, Ursula Monkton, is considered by the Hempstocks a mere pest or flea. In other words, despite how scary humans find her, she's at the bottom of the barrel, alluding to greater horror still, of which even Ursula Monkton is afraid. The choice to make the hero 7 heightens the horror, as he's largely powerless. His feelings of frustration and helplessness seep into the reader, and the ending, without giving too much away, isn't exactly a happy one, though the opening reveals that our hero survives. though whether or not he's unscathed is another matter. I'll add that I really related to our unnamed hero. Like him, children didn't attend my birthday parties, and I was the weird child who preferred the company of books and fantasy stories to other children, with the exception of those kids who were as strange as me. It's a shame Gaiman has turned out like he did, because as someone with autism, I really connected to this story. And I felt sadness when considering the implication that some of the horrors in these stories were inspired by true events. Nothing excuses what the author did, but this is a powerful book. It was relatable to me as the weird kid people often misunderstood. So I could empathize with the protagonist, and that Gaiman turned out to be a monster perhaps adds to the creepiness of the book, especially given a particular quote within the novel on the nature of monsters. If you are no longer comfortable reading Gaiman, that's fair, but I picked up this book secondhand, and I don't regret reading it. A part of me regrets how much I loved it, because I don't want to love Gaiman, but this book, for what it's worth, also made me feel seen and disturbed me, something only a handful of authors, such as Stephen King, have managed to do. Speaking of Stephen King, we have The Body. I've long been a fan of the film adaptation Stand By Me, and I wasn't disappointed with the novel. If you've seen the movie, it's a largely faithful adaptation of the book, though of course the novella is able to go into greater detail. We get more insight into Gordy's writing career, as well as his thought process during the adventure. If you don't know, our story follows 4 boys, Gordy, Chris, Teddy, and Vern, who venture into the woods to see a dead body, namely of Ray Brower, a boy their own age. While this is a creepy premise, this story is full of heart. There's plenty of humor, and some of it isn't politically correct, but that adds to the realness for me. Stephen King perfectly captures a long-gone time and place, while also speaking to the feeling of adolescence, which exists on a precipice, trapped between childhood and adulthood. The Body is a classic coming-of-age story, but it's more than that. It's a story about death and mortality itself. After losing his brother Denny, Gordy is coming to terms with the reality of death. It is said that childhood is the kingdom where nobody dies, but the loss of Denny, of someone Gordy knew, brings it home to him, and the need to see Brower, a boy who could have been him, is a confirmation. In accepting the existence of death, Gordy takes a pivotal step towards adulthood. That he nearly dies in the same way Ray Brower did is also telling, as in reflecting on his adventure, he sees himself in Ray. He remembers a boy he could have been, stripped of his future, and everything that means anything to him. There are some changes the film's made that I preferred, but there are also sections from the book, which were cut, that I loved. So it's a tie in terms of what version I prefer. And the movie is mostly faithful to the book, exploring themes of death, grief, coming of age, and what it means to be the underdog. This isn't just a good book for Halloween. It's a powerful story everyone should read. Next, I read another ghost story, The Spirit Bares Its Teeth. Andrew Joseph White is a new author for me, but I'm enjoying his work so far. This novel follows Silas, who's diagnosed with a mysterious illness known as veil sickness and sent to a reform school for girls. Deep down, Silas has long known he was a boy, but his family seeing him as Gloria is the least of his problems because on reaching the school, he's met by the ghosts of former students, which can only mean one thing. Set in the Victorian times, this book is part horror and part mystery. It's atmospheric, with vivid, often disturbing imagery. Silas, despite his abilities to speak with the dead, dreams of being a doctor, and the circumstances at the school are such that his talents come in handy. I found Silas an engaging and realistic character. He never fell into the trap of being either incompetent or too capable. It's easy to feel not only for his plight, but that of the girls with which he shares his prison. This novel explores prejudice in all its layers, addressing not only the isolation felt by Silas and his partner-to-be Daphne, but by women, by anyone who is different. White doesn't sugarcoat the horrors his characters face, making this novel disturbing, but perfect for Halloween. When it comes to the overall feel of this novel and the descriptions, this book feels to me like a cross between Jane Eyre and Crimson Peaks. Braxton's School for Girls is as isolating as any Gothic setting, highlighting the constant vulnerability and helplessness of the less privileged, but also the power to fight back, not only against your oppressors, but against your own internalized hate. It's a timely novel on several levels, though I did find the ending a bit abrupt. The book concludes with loose threads, implying rather than showing what the characters plan to do next. And without going into spoilers, a certain villain is still on the loose. I'm not sure what White is planning, if there's going to be a sequel. If there is, I'll definitely be reading it because I feel like we need one. Next, we have The Wolf and the Woodsman. I went into this story expecting a dark fairy tale retelling, replete with creepy forests and echoes of myth, and this book delivers that, but more. While the first half of the book sees our protagonist, Vec, traveling across frosted plains and through dark woods, the second half of the story brings us to the capital city, where the story shifts into one of political machinations, religious tensions, and the plotting of would-be monarchs. Vec is a pagan, the only so-called wolf girl in her village without magic, and she's offered to the woodsmen, who come periodically as a sacrifice in lieu of another girl, Catelyn. Catelyn is one of two seers, and so Vec is disguised as a seer and offered to the woodsmen in her stead. The woodsmen, who have long plagued the village, taking wolf girls never to be seen again to their king, fall for the bait. However, before much ground can be covered, the party is attacked, leaving only two survivors, Vec, the magicless wolf girl, and Gaspar, who in addition to being a woodsman, is the disgraced prince. Without spoiling too much, this is an enemies to lovers story, but it's more than that. The romance never takes over the story, instead complementing its themes of religious persecution, the tensions between melding cultures, and the meaning of blood and family ties. Plus, the love story is a slow burn, something I personally love, even prefer in my romances. Ava Reid's novel is a powerful debut, and having read her other novel, Juniper and Thorn, I can safely say I loved this book too. This novel features adventure, sacrifice, and monsters both literal and human. There are malevolent monarchs, wicked witches, and redeemed tormentors. Vec's story is engaging, demonstrating the power one can wield even without magic. She is interesting regardless of her abilities, with the exploration of her mixed heritage a bright point for me. I loved the deep dive into not only her pagan background, inherited from her mother, but her Yehuli roots, inherited from her father. Vec's struggle to fit in, to feel either wholly pagan or Yehuli, makes for a compelling narrative, and her loyalty to and tensions between her contradictory backgrounds are represented by the talisman she carries, a braid of her late mother's hair, and a Yehuli coin forged by her father. Moreover, her love interest, Gaspar, is similarly mixed, making him something of a foil and an echo to Avec. Despite being a standalone novel, Reed offers an original world with its own mythology and magic system, crafting a mythos that clearly borrows from real-world mythologies while feeling unique in its own right. The novel has a wintry feel, featuring icy plains and frosted landscapes, flurries of snow and bald trees, but it has an autumnal feel all the same, making it a book I loved reading during this season. I hope to continue enjoying Ava Reed's books in the future, and I recommend this one for the cold days of transition from fall to winter. Angela Carter's Wise Children wasn't exactly what I was expecting, but that's the nature of Carter's work. While I liked the story overall, it wasn't as fantastical and strange as I was hoping it would be, at least by Carter's standards. That's not to say it didn't have its weird moments, because it did, and there's still that undercurrent of magical realism. But I personally prefer those stories of hers, which are magical, atmospheric, or bizarre. And this novel is more grounded in reality, though I acknowledge my reaction to this book is more indicative of my preferences and expectations. Those aside, I enjoyed the story for what it is. I enjoy stories with tangled family trees and familial drama, and this short novel had plenty of that. There were echoes of the Magic Toy Shop in the narrative, and certain plot points in which relatives engage in, shall we say, taboo acts also reminded me of Anne Rice. I've compared Anne Rice to Angela Carter before, but the two authors hit a lot of the same beats for me. This novel follows two elderly women as they reflect on their past. Taken through their lives, we learn they were bastards. That is, unacknowledged children fathered by a man big in showbiz. When their father refuses to take responsibility for them, telling anyone publicly they're instead his nieces, their uncle intervenes, assuming the fathership role. They're raised by a woman they simply refer to as Grandma, and they grow up to become dancers, appearing on stage and within cinema. Their course as performers means that they often run into their father, and we explore the messy dynamics which make up their family, diving into other illegitimate children, love affairs, divorces, and adultery. Hearts are broken, the parentage of several children is dubious, and some family members are just awful people, causing problems or raising an uproar. There's even the implication, though never direct proof, of a daughter attempting to kill her mother in order to secure her fortune. If you're fascinated with the performance arts, complex family trees, familial drama, and magical realism, this book is never boring, though it's understated by Carter's usual standards. A critically acclaimed novel at the time, which was the last novel published before her passing. Jumping to another Andrew Joseph White novel, we have Compound Fracture. Miles is a trans kid in a small town, his family being in a decades-old feud with the sheriffs. This town is full of secrets. Histories are hidden, murders are covered up, and the town is left to endure the abuses of the sheriff and his son. When Miles digs up photographs implicating the sheriff, he is violently assaulted, nearly killed, by the sheriff's son and his cronies, only to see a strange figure covered in coal dust when he wakes up in the hospital. This book was not what I expected, but I mean that in a good way. I expected an occasionally violent mystery with a ghost, and there are secrets to be uncovered, especially as concerns the ghost. but events escalate. The feud ramps up, and without spoiling too much, there are bodies involved. This novel explores themes of vigilantism, oppression, right and wrong, and how the past informs our present. We also learn about Miles as he comes to terms with not only being trans, but autistic, and how being marginalized in that respect intersects with his ostracization as a member of the Abernathy family. This book was oddly cathartic. I feel strange saying that, given the morally gray choices made within the narrative. And I wouldn't necessarily condone the same choices in real life, but this novel takes place in modern times, in an extremely conservative town in the States, so I'm also not shedding any tears for certain characters. Sadly, this book is even more relevant than when it came out, and it can be heavy. There were moments when I felt like I was reading a dystopia, only to remember with quiet horror that this is real life, or a close and bloody reflection of it. As with The Spirit Bares Its Teeth, Compound Fracture isn't for the squeamish. There's some gory, graphically described scenes, but this novel has a lot to say, and many moments will have you on the edge of your seat, rooting for the characters and recoiling from their actions simultaneously. If you're questioning Miles' choices, he is too, which made me empathize all the more with him. As an autistic individual, I also found him relatable, and I do think autistic representation is important more than ever now in the wake of the misinformation now being spread about us. If you can handle murder, gore, medical trauma, and topical themes, this book is for you. Not considering myself a huge mystery fan, I slept on this delightful collection of short stories. Inventive and clever, Holmes popularized the cozy mystery genre as we know it. To my surprise, most of these tales don't even involve a murder, exploring instead vanished brides or stolen jewels. For all that, Sherlock's adventures are fun to follow, managing to be creative and interesting without the need for a body, with several of the tales also taking place during the fall, and those that don't still retaining through their London fog and smog that autumnal feeling. These stories are perfect to read during cold, cloudy days. There's a sentence I want to highlight, a remark from Holmes to his trusty sidekick, Watson. "Draw your chair up and hand me my violin, for the only problem we have still to solve is how to while away these bleak autumnal evenings." If that doesn't recommend this collection for this season, I don't know what will. Beyond the witty mysteries, Holmes himself is a fascinating character. Whether it's his genius deduction skills, his occasionally blunt commentary, his substance-related vices, or his passion for music, his DNA remains in characters we love today. As a fan of Burton's version of Wednesday, I can safely say that without Sherlock Holmes, we wouldn't have our more modern asocial sleuths. Reading Ray Bradbury's Something Wicked This Way Comes, I was struck by the obvious influence Bradbury had on future writers. Having read The Ocean at the End of the Lane or several of Stephen King's books, reading this felt like coming home, like meeting the parents of an old friend, familiar features or mannerisms repeating in their faces and movements respectively. Though this book could be considered overwritten by modern standards, Bradbury was that rare writer who could make purple prose not only acceptable, but masterful. His descriptions are strange and unsettling, immersing you in the story with the batwing flap of a black tent. The last chapters in particular are scary, featuring blind witches, stoppered senses, and near-death experiences. The scenes within the library are especially frightful, the villains unforgettable throughout. But to say more would spoil the story. We follow two boys as they face the terrors and temptations of a supernatural carnival. Arriving a week before Halloween to a small town in Illinois, this foreboding collection of freaks and monsters, headed by a vampire-esque figure, offer more than thrills. The battle of teenage boys against a mysterious and ancient evil is echoed later in books like Stephen King's It. But King's fairy tale also echoes Bradbury. If you've read the latter, the carnival's centerpiece, the carousel that goes backwards and forwards, offering a curse in the guise of a gift, will be familiar to you. Suffice it to say that if you love Stephen King, this novel is a must-read. With its descriptions of dead leaves and dead things that move in the night, it's an ideal autumn book. Of course, you can't discuss Ray Bradbury and spooky season without mentioning the Halloween tree. Whimsical, spooky, and magical, this short and sweet book is a love letter to Halloween, touching on other cultures and time periods, taking us from the tombs of Egypt to the Day of the Dead festivals in Mexico. This shadowy, candlelit tale is less a story about Halloween and more a savoring of it, feasting on descriptions of gargoyles, monster kites, and graveyards. This novella is best read on Halloween itself. We follow a group of trick-or-treaters as they're whisked away by the mysterious mound shroud, not only to learn about Halloween, but to save their friend Pipkin. Beyond the dark magic and sinister beauty of their adventures, during which we're confronted with death itself, the boys are asked to make a terrible sacrifice, lest their dear Pipkin be lost forever. I can't say much more, except that this book was a sumptuous feast of Halloween imagery and themes, unsettling as well as delightful. A fun read, which nevertheless touches on heavier concepts. This is a book that makes death itself an adventure, without undermining its reality. Out of all the stories on this list, this homage to Halloween should, if you choose to read it, always be read on October 31st. From the spooky to the magical, the strange to the mundane, these stories, ranging from mysteries to fairy tales, captured the autumn season for me, offering powerful themes, twisting plots, and engaging characters. My spooky season was made complete. Halloween isn't Halloween without a cozy book to curl up with. And I hope you've found some recommendations, either to carry into November for those not ready to let spooky season go, or to kick off next year. Thank you for watching, and happy reading!